Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Carrie Robinson, the Executive Director of the National Leadership Roundtable on Church Management. The Leadership Roundtable is a unique collaboration of clergy, religious, and lay executive leaders, all of whom hold senior positions of responsibility across myriad sectors and industries, and all of whom deeply love the Catholic Church. Those same leaders desire to contribute in meaningful and practically effective ways back to the church that they love and value. Our mission is simple and focused. We exist to promote best practices and excellence in the management, finances, and human resource development of the Catholic Church in the U.S. We pay particular attention to utilizing and cultivating the expertise of the laity in the temporal affairs of the Church. And together we work with bishops across the country and in every region to strengthen the temporal affairs of the Church. We abide by key guiding principles and charisms. First, we are intentionally positive and laudatory. The first approach is to identify those temporal best practices in parishes, in dioceses, in religious communities, and in Catholic institutions that already are at play, are operative, are inspiring and effective. And when we find those, we elevate them and celebrate them and disseminate them because they are worthy of emulation by others. Toward this end, we have created an online clearinghouse of information and best practices called Churchopedia, and I welcome you to post your own example of best practice in management or finance, communications, or human resource development so that others may benefit from that. Secondly, we are very faithful to a profound sense of Christian stewardship. This collection of men and women care deeply about living out of an authentic Christian stewardship. One definition of stewardship is the proper care of all that has been entrusted to one. But a deeper understanding of Christian stewardship is the recognition and proper care of the potential at hand. That informs all that we do at the Leadership Roundtable. A third striking characteristic is an intentional catalytic desire to enhance strategic relationships. We have identified over 22 national Catholic organizations whose own mission has a bearing on ours. We intentionally collaborate and try to promote and maximize the capacity that comes from such relationships. Imagine how much can be accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. We have developed any number of programs and resources and services for utilization at the parish level, at the diocesan level, and at the Catholic institutional level. Among these are the Standards for Excellence program, a roadmap of 55 Standards for Excellence that can be utilized and implemented and adhered to in every parish, in every diocese, and in every religious institution. We have a range of consultative services where we draw from the talent of many institutions in service to the bishop or to the pastor or to the provincial, helping solve many contemporary challenges facing the Church. We have an extraordinary effort underway in partnership with Yale to identify talented young adult Catholics and equip them to be of immediate and relevant service to the Church, serving on pastoral councils, on diocesan finance councils, and the like. We have partnered with Seton Hall and provide a new pastor's training course, which has been received extremely well. You will be introduced to these and many other resources. With us now is Father Brian Hare, Secretary of Health and Social Services for the Archdiocese of Boston, and a man who has been supportive of the Leadership Roundtable from its inception. Father Hare, in 2006, the Leadership Roundtable bestowed its inaugural Best Practices Award on the Archdiocese of Boston, specifically for the Boston Financial Transparency Project. Can you tell us something about that project?
Yes, as you noted, it was in 2006. Cardinal O'Malley had come to Boston as the new Archbishop of Boston in 2003. As we all know, he walked into a very complicated situation. We had just been through the intensive opening years of the sexual abuse crisis, and in addition to that, he inherited, as any major archbishop does these days, all the large questions that go with being a large urban diocese in the United States. So he was looking, I think, for fundamental signs that he could communicate to the church and the wider society about the direction in which he wished to take the archdiocese. And clearly, one of the questions that the church in the United States was facing at that time, and to some degree continues to face, is this question of trust. I always say it's a two-dimensional question: trust between the members of the church and the leadership of the church, and secondly, trust in the wider society about the role of the Catholic Church in the United States today. And I think the initiative of the financial transparency was both important in itself, because any major archdiocese today faces huge financial questions, but secondly, I think that Cardinal saw it as an example of trying to build trust within the church as a whole in the wider community by making clear both what resources the church had, what kind of problems it faced, and how he was going to report on this systematically to illustrate both the good faith of the church in terms of confronting problems, and secondly, to try to draw back into the community of the church people who had left and other people who were there but were very hesitant to provide any financial help because they had lost trust in the way the institution worked. So the Transparency Project was a process of first gathering together the most competent lay people we could find, people who were trusted in the financial community in Boston, people drawn from the university world and from the financial world and the business world in Boston, and under their guidance, in a sense, to assess this enormously complicated reality called the corporation soul of the Archdiocese of Boston, and lay out every piece of its budgetary maze, if you will, in all its dimensions, make known what the different entities were, where the resources came from, what kind of problems each of them faced, and what he planned to do about it in order to rebuild the church, which was the theme he took when he came here to Boston.
Yeah. And what practical consequences have you been able to measure as a result of that very bold and important move toward full financial accountability and transparency here in the Archdiocese?
Well, first of all, I think it made a significant impact on the public mind and the mind of the Catholic community. Having gathered together this expert committee and having them drill down into every dimension of the church's life and putting it on display was, first of all, something new. I mean, the degree, it's not to say there weren't previous ways in which parishes put out financial statements, and the diocese did, but the transparency idea drove that committee, I think, to find new ways to make clear how complicated an entity the church was. Secondly, it attracted the attention of the press. They covered it with great detail, and I can remember the story. The reporter, who was a reporter who knew the church very, very well, said you just wouldn't understand how complicated this entity is until you really tried to gather up all the pieces this way. Thirdly, there's been no question that it has made an impact in terms of the fundraising capability of the church. At that time, in 2006, we were still in very serious problems in terms of a huge fall-off in the Archbishop's Appeal, which is the collection in the diocese that is diocesan-wide and funds the central administration of the diocese. We are still not where we need to be, but this year, in a year that everyone found difficult to raise money, we raised $13.5 million. Wonderful. And so it is that kind of change. It is one dimension. The awareness of the public of what we are and how we do it's another dimension. And then finally, this set a tone for lay cooperation with the Archbishop. I mean, I think the way he called people together, the way he simply gave them a task and let them go about their work knowing that they had a skill set that the church needed, and then in publicizing the work, I think it gave confidence to lay people with very important skill sets that if they contribute their time to the church, their talent will be well used. I think that is an ongoing gift.
And extrapolating from the experience at the archdiocesan level, what advice would you give to pastors and parish leaders in their efforts to become equally transparent and accountable with finances?
Well, I think what we've tried to do here in Boston is to use the archdiocesan model, which importantly was aimed at the pastors themselves, that they would have confidence that the resources of the diocese are being well used. And so the hope was that the transparency project, if you will, set a model for how parishes could function. Now, there are smaller entities. You don't have all the talent to draw upon that you do when you're looking across the whole archdiocese. But in fact, the part of what it means to be the Catholic community today is to be a community with a very extensive educated base, and so each parish does have within it, almost every one, the capacities to model this transparency project. That's a first kind of effort. I think the second kind of effort is that while this was focused on finance, it is really possible to replicate this model at the parish and diocesan level as we approach other problems, religious education in the problem, in the parish and in the diocese. What kind of skill sets do you need? Reaching out to a wider community of Catholics that have distanced themselves for various reasons from the church. That is not going to be possible to do in an effective way unless we can have lay religious clergy collaboration. Thirdly, picking up on that point, what we face here in Boston is, and the Church in the United States faces it, so it has applicability. We face a major demographic change in terms of church professionals. The age of the ordained clergy particularly means that even in a diocese like this, where it used to be taken for granted that you'd have more than one priest in a parish, that is simply not the case anymore. So unless we can build these models of lay clergy cooperation, we're not going to be able to fulfill the ministry of the church, the social service ministry of the church, the healthcare ministry, and most importantly, we're not going to be able to function as effectively at the parish level as we need to function to both serve those who are there, draw others back into the church, and open the church up to any who might find in it a home for their spiritual life.
Yeah. And of course, you're speaking to a core characteristic of the Leadership Roundtable itself. In itself, it is a network of ordained religious and lay people radically committed to extending their competencies to strengthen the temporal affairs of the church. I'm wondering if you find as we have, a positive consequence of engaging talented laity in the areas that they're most proficient in service to the church, one of evangelization.
No question about that. that, in a sense, the Round Table at the national level was a kind of model of this lay clerical collaboration at every level of the life of the church. And to some degree, if you want to engage people in the community of faith, there are many different pieces that you have to put together. There's got to be a spiritual component to it that draws people into their own search for meaning and direction in life. But secondly, when you draw people in, they precisely want to use the resources they have and the talent they have. So structuring those possibilities so that people can not only be participants in the life of the community and receive what the church must offer to people, spiritual direction, intellectual content of the life of faith, and opportunities for citizenship service. In addition to that, people will then want to, I think, offer their service to the life of the community. So we've got to structure opportunities that make those realistic and satisfying encounters with the life of the community.
So well said. Father Hare, let me thank you for your service, not only to the Leadership Roundtable, but to the church and the whole of the Archdiocese of Boston. Many thanks for being here with us.
Glad to do it.
For more information on the Leadership Roundtable, its programs and resources in service to the church, please visit our website, theleadershiproundtable.org. I'm Carrie Robinson, and thank you for joining us.